Hello, Bio20. Welcome to Blood Vessels and Homeostatic Regulation. Today, our intention for learning is to understand the three types of blood vessels and how they transport blood around your body, as well as how does blood help regulate temperature in your body. How do you know if you understand this concept? Is you should be able to tell me the difference between an artery, a vein, and a capillary, the role of capillaries, the role of an artery, the role of a vein. So what are they doing? Their functions. And you should be able to define the words homeostatic regulation through vasodilation and vasoconstriction. So today we're going to start off in the structure of blood vessels in arteries. Anywhere you see a capitalized word, so all the letters are capitalized, add those to your notes. So today we're going to talk about function of artery. The function of arteries are to carry blood away from your heart. So we're talking aorta, pulmonary arteries. When you load them up with blood, they're sending them to either the body or the lungs. So arteries carry blood away from your heart. When we talk about the thickness of an artery, we're talking about the elastic wall. So if you look at the artery as a whole, you can see there's many, many, many different layers, okay? But essentially all of these layers make up for a very thick wall as blood is passing through. Now, this wall is unique because it has a lot of stretch to it. So it has very thick elastic walls, we say. This allows for the artery to essentially stretch as it controls the flow of blood. So when the artery loads blood into it from, let's say, the heart into the aorta, the wall of the artery will stretch out as it gets lots of blood pushed into there, so a lot of pressure. And then as the blood passes past it, it'll relax back into its regular shape. We can actually feel the contraction and relaxation of arteries because we know what a pulse is. Now, the pulse essentially is when the elastic wall of the artery expands during the contractions of the ventricles and then goes back to its regular shape during the relaxation of ventricles. We've learned that the contraction of ventricles happens when the Purkinje fibers signal the ventricles to push blood out. We've also learned that that causes us to have our high number in our blood pressure or our systolic number, okay? And that's also where we get our pulse. Now you will see in this picture that there's another part to this called arterioles, and this is going to come into an important role later. So this is an artery. Here we have the structure of veins. Essentially, their function is to carry blood towards the heart. So think pulmonary vein, superior inferior vena cava. Their job is to bring blood towards the heart. Now, unlike arteries, their walls are really thin. There's not as much elasticity to them. So it actually makes them look much larger than arteries when you're looking at them on a microscope. When you look at an artery, its circumference is very tiny. So where blood is passing through is actually quite a small hole because the rest of the artery is this big, thick, elastic wall. If you look at a vein under a microscope, it looks extremely large because the walls are not as thick. That presents a problem for veins because veins need to control the blood flow as well. So instead of being able to expand and contract to help control blood flow, veins actually have inside of them one-way valves. So if blood was to come in through this end here and travel up, it would push against the valve, open the valve up, and then load into the next part of the vein. When the blood has passed through, the valve will close, and then it'll do it again and again and again. Sometimes through pressure or other circumstances, you can damage these valves and you can damage how much blood is being passed from one part of the vein to the other. And then you end up with something like this, which is essentially varicose veins. Varicose veins are bulging veins that are caused by damage to them, where their valves are not working properly. The next part we're going to talk about are capillaries. And capillaries are very, very, very tiny blood vessels. So their blood flow through a capillary bed, which is what we call a ton of capillaries together, is not constant. It's just going through in the areas that are needed. So it can be actually shunted back and forth between arteries and veins because that's what connects the two. And you can bypass capillaries by using things like sphincters and ways to open and close. A sphincter is essentially a tightening and a loosening of an area in the capillary. Sometimes we need to also bypass capillary beds to go to push blood to other parts of the body when we're doing certain things, such as eating. We're not going to need a ton of blood in certain areas. It's going to go more to our digestive tract. So capillaries join arteries and veins. That's its role because blood has to pass all over our body. But what we need to recognize is that arteries and veins are quite large structures. So in order for an artery and a vein to get blood back and forth, it's going to pass through a capillary. But capillaries only allow red blood cells to travel through them in single file lines. So what they have to do is an artery has to go into something smaller called an arteriole. It's a smaller structure that then closes the opening, so it makes the opening a lot smaller as blood passes into a capillary. So blood will be in an artery to an arteriole to a capillary. It'll travel through the capillary bed into something called a venule, which is essentially the same thing as an arteriole, just this time for veins. So a smaller looking vein. Those are the three types of blood vessels that run through your body. Again, venule and arteriole, are added into that. What you need to know: function, what they look like, and how they work. Now what we want to talk about is homeostatic regulation in the world of vasodilation and vasoconstriction. So vasodilation is defined as vessels dilate or get bigger to increase the amount of blood flowing so that heat can be lost from the skin. So think about you're outside in the summertime, you're overexerting, your face becomes really red, you're sweating a lot. What's actually happening is vasodilation. You have tons of capillary beds close to the surface of your skin. So rather than blood traveling deeper in your skin, what happens is it shoots up into these capillary beds that are closer to the surface of your skin, causing your skin to look red because blood is flowing close to the surface. And when it does that, the heat inside your body is dissipated or lost from your skin because it's cooler on the outside of your skin than it is in your body. So heat moves and dissipates from your blood, and your skin will actually cool off and you will become cooler. Homeostatic regulation in the world of vasoconstriction is the opposite. It's instead of the blood vessels opening, they get smaller near the surface of your skin, so blood is not pushed over there. Instead, the blood stays close to the internal part of your body. It stays in a deeper vein, so then that way you stay warmer. So rather than traveling all the way through the surface capillaries, it stays in the deep vein. So rather than we lose heat this way, heat stays inside. We always want to try and balance the different types of heat production and heat loss. And this is important because we want to maintain a certain temperature because we learned enzymes work at a really important temperature. When we mix things like alcohol and nicotine, okay, they are actually vasodilators and they cause blood to rush to the surface of the skin. So people that are smoking or people that are drinking, you may notice that they get flushed in the skin. And that is because they're actually opening up the blood vessels. So what happens is when a person is drinking, they may feel warm, but in actuality, they are losing quite a bit of heat from their skin because their vessels have dilated, and they may not need to lose heat, but they are losing heat. So they eventually may feel cooler later on. So again, make sure you understand the difference between vasoconstriction and vasodilation, and hopefully you have everything in your notes. And if you have any questions, please let me know.